Hello everyone, welcome back to another breakdown video. We are doing the heavy one. This is the third track out of the 9 and it is aptly called Suicide. Now this one's a little bit heavy because of the obvious subject material that it's based off of, and it's also a little bit of a meditation on my own experiences with mental health. It's a pretty vulnerable video that this one is. I try and make things as both transparent as possible, but also as honest as possible as well. This one hits deep for me. In my adolescence, I've gone through unhelpful feelings of self-harm. I'm a very self-deprecating person. You know, in middle school, you know, around that age, I was in a pretty dark time. Well, we're not like that anymore, which is good. I found Christ and he saved me from that. But that's a story for another time. We already have the foundations of this piece already laid out before I even started it. Now, in my studies so I did the HSC in high school. In my studies for music, I did music too. I think all of us remember studying The Rite of Spring, Stravinsky piece. Maybe the fact that I had to search that up to confirm might have disappointed a few people. The Rite of Spring is about a Russian pagan like tribe or village, and basically they sacrifice a young virgin, and the interesting way that they sacrifice her is they get her to dance to death. The Rite of Spring is an orchestral piece. It's also a ballet as well, which I highly recommend watching. It is so weird. It's great. I probably wouldn't listen to it normally if I'm in the car or anything like that, but it's a fun sort of thing to whip out when you want to entertain people and be like, hey, look at this weird thing. I found the premise of the sacrifice to be basically a self-inflicted thing, if not forced, but I found that really interesting, especially someone dancing themselves to death. Why don't I try and kind of mooch off of that a little bit and make it so that someone plays themselves to death by going faster and faster and then just dying of exhaustion. This piece is basically so I guess you could call it a theme of variations, but I personally don't think that there's enough variations to really call it a theme of variations. And basically it's about a piano performer who is deeply depressed, who's deeply troubled, and he tries to mask his own sorrow with a facade of joyfulness. There's a very good mental health awareness ad that I think England did in recent years. It drew attention to the fact that, yes, people that outwardly look depressed might be depressed, but also people that don't look depressed can also be depressed as well. It's usually people that you probably wouldn't assume would be going through stuff like that are going through some hard times. Now that's not saying that everyone is depressed. I feel like it's a really good ad that makes aware that, hey, you know, everyone and anyone can be affected by these things. So I decided to take that to the extreme, and well, not really to the extreme, because I found in myself, in how I held myself in my adolescence, that, you know, I tried to make it look like that there was nothing wrong at all. This entire piece, if you didn't read the title of it, or if you didn't listen to what I was saying, you would think that it was just a fun waltz, right? Just a fun piece of music, when in fact, it's actually a deeply depressing one. This is just the mask that this particular performer puts on himself. So that's the story of how it goes. And you'll see that throughout this entire piece, there's elements where the sadness does creep through. And then to compensate, he becomes even more like, you know, over the top in terms of happy and like, you know, happy-go-lucky type stuff. That's a little spiel about the premise behind the whole thing, both personal, but also the program, the narrative behind this piece. So maybe it's a good idea to actually start looking at it. This one is one of the more technically demanding pieces that I had to play. We are presented with the primary theme. So there's two themes that are repeated throughout the entire thing, or two main themes. There's an A and a B. This is the A section, so very happy, a fun waltz to play. And it is fun to play. The chords are, I think they're pretty simple. A, so we're in the tonality of A. D, B minor, E, A, C sharp major, D major, B minor, D, E. Right. Okay, so we have just an A to D, so that's a 1 to a 4, and then the minor third. Oh wait, sorry, minor second. 5. So we just have a 2-5-1 going on. And then we have C sharp, which is the major third. Major 3, 4, 2, 4, 1, 5, 1. Yeah. So pretty simple in terms of the chords. I guess the 2-5-1 is pretty stock standard. The major 3, I love that. To the 3 to the 4. I guess that's not too out of the ordinary. Now the melody is something that is a bit more interesting. Now I started writing this as the melody first, and then I constructed the chords around it. So it was. So I wanted to, when I started this one out, I wanted it to be a bit more chromatic, which is why you have, instead of, my process for this one was, I was thinking of the melody, okay, I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, okay, but every so often, I want it to not land correctly. I want it to be a semitone off and then correct up. So, which is why we have, right? Instead of, we did. That's what you would expect, but, right. I wanted to make the melody a bit more quirky in that way. I chucked in a few chromaticisms, but they don't make it sound bad or weird at all. It just makes the melody sound a little bit odd, but it still sounds fine. So there's bits in this piece where I pull back the tempo a lot and then I speed up again. When you are putting a facade on, you can only keep it up for so long before it kind of starts to drop, and then you have to be conscious about maintaining your facade again, and you have to bring it back up. So that's what that kind of is meant to represent or emulate, right? So. And then, whoop. Gotta bring it back up. Right? Even these chords, they sound a lot darker than that first bit. This one here. I think it's the that dominant 7 there, and then comes back to happy again. Oh yeah, okay, so that's the second bit of it. So we go to the dominant, so we're in E now. Very Mozart-y, Beethoven-y, like sort of your stock standard classical waltz type thing. I love the little, right, the melody, main melody on top, and then da 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 dum bum ba dum ba da bum ba. Also, I just noticed, if you watch the video closely, you can see very clearly my computer. I have Logic up, and you can see the number of takes that I've had to do for that. I think it was, I don't know how many that was. I know one of them I did 28, which might be not that much, but yeah, I was like in a rush because I had to. So I had like 4 days to film all of these things before I headed off on my mission trip. There was another church that I went to help out with in the summer. Actually, we're going to come back in January, which is pretty cool. So we're in E, and then A, D. Yeah, that's a B major. And then the little sneaky dominant in there. I called them Disney voicings because in like the 1950s 60s Disney, like the choir arrangements are very like I love these clusters here. Okay, so let's try and figure out what these chords are. So that's an E flat half diminished with an F sharp on the bottom. So that's basically inverse inversion. So the bass is just up, 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 up. Right. To the 5. 1. Okay, so that's a full diminished chord. The way that I would write it, I'll make it so that it's easy for the pianist to play it. E flat half diminished, F on the bottom. D full diminished. So that's an A6 over G sharp. Another full diminished, B full diminished over A. And then A6 with a B flat on the bottom. F sharp full diminished with a B at the bottom. And then to an E, so. An E7 technically. So yeah, that's a bit of a flustercluck. I was just being like, sometimes it just comes naturally in your right hand to be like, okay, keep the same relative shape. And also, the important thing is to keep that melody up there. Right? And then we get to this second section. D, E, so this is the bit where the sadness seeps through a lot more, and that's reflected in the tonality. So D, and then compensate again. To the E, dominant, and then that leads back into A. Right? And then we have just a D run. It's just a D descending, but in thirds. And then so you have it's in second inversion. So basically just a. And then to the E. So that I feel like that leads into it quite well. And then now we come back to the beginning. Alright, so we now come to the repeat. This is the second time that you hear everything again. From that, you could hear me pulling and pushing the tempo a lot more. So as this piece progresses, the melody, the line, the flow of the piece gets a bit more interrupted, more hesitant, more as if someone is stumbling and they're trying to get themselves back up. So, you have the... from from that, there's not too much variation in that section. The repeat of the... That's different because it gets faster, right? So and of course, trying to overcompensate or, appear more happy than the person's actually feeling. There's bits of ragtime-esque things that show up in this. It's fun to play, and I thought it would be fun to include in there. A good friend of mine said to me one day, Alex, I can't think of one classical piano piece that is not depressing. And of course, I can go on for like a 3-hour rant about how that's wrong. But, a lot of the most popular piano pieces from the classical period, by classical I mean like Baroque to Romantic or Impressionist, they are quite... The famous ones are usually the slower movements, and they're usually a bit more sensitive, more sad, more bittersweet. So ragtime for me, when I think of happy piano, I usually think of ragtime or maybe Mozart. Mozart seems to be a pretty happy-go-lucky dude, even though his life was not always the greatest. I tried to channel in my Mozart and just sort of... I'm not very well versed in ragtime. I do have to say that. I'm just going to be honest. I just emulated what my stereotypical ragtime in my head felt like. This isn't me trying to play ragtime, because I know that, quite like jazz, there's a lot of cultural baggage and stuff that you need to have before you can have that level of authenticity when you play jazz. This is me just pulling different aesthetics that I particularly enjoy. They're in no means an attempt to recreate or change or appropriate. Although, of course, what I'm doing is a little bit of appropriation. I don't mean to do it in a degrading way or anything like that. This is just me expressing that this type of music is, well, at least for this one, this is what particularly sparks an aesthetic of joy for me. I do a lot of those pauses, and those pauses get more and more dramatic as the piece goes on. More or less the same. This bit here, this is the modulation. So this is the third time that you hear everything again. And every time that the main themes repeat, they get more and more, I'll say, detached. Like in the beginning, it's more... that sort of thing. In this, we have more of a... to B major, and then to C sharp major, to F sharp dominant 7. Chordally, I don't know what I was doing there, but it works. So we have 5, and then the minor 5, 2, and this is the 5. Yeah, okay, so we did a 2-5-1 going into F sharp minor. That goes into the minor. So this is the actual explicitly sad section of this piece. Okay, so Le Depresso bit. F sharp minor, E major, A major, and then D major. And then D sharp minor, E flat minor, and that's E major. And then it repeats again. F sharp minor, E, A, D, and then a D descending run, and then that goes to E, right? It's not quite the same as the because it starts a bit lower down. It doesn't start on the third and the fifth. It starts on the first and the third. Right? Okay, it comes back up. Okay, so we have, this is the hard bit. So it's basically but it's chromaticized. And it basically is just a straight chromatic down, then an up, and then a back down. So we have a... Oh, there's a really bad latency on my keyboard right now for some reason, and I don't know why. So that's pretty hard to do. So I think it's a triplet. Yeah, so it's a triplet semi-quaver? Triplet quavers, yeah. This should be, on paper, it's quite easy, because it's just chromatic down, up. I think the challenge for me is doing that while keeping... like, keeping the left hand bouncy, because they're not the biggest leaps, but they're... like, they're still quite challenging, at least for me. As someone that doesn't really play too much technically demanding pieces, this is quite challenging for me. Especially the bit where... So I really need to practice with a metronome and really get those timings right, because I was not very happy with this performance. You can tell that I'm just kind of... I was too loose with everything. And you can tell that it sounds very undisciplined and it's not very good. Practice with a metronome, doing it slowly, one hand separated. And then we have the... But, of course, we have another variation, and it is very fast. So basically... Whoa. Damn, that's killer. Far out. Let's get to the end, the last bit. That's it. So we have the... So this is now syncopated. Again, emulating more of a rag feel. Just thought that it would match the vibe of the sped up variations of the main melody. And then to end it, we have a repetition. It's a rather faster version of what you heard at the beginning, except that it ends abruptly. And the reason why it ends abruptly is because the guy kills himself. He either passes out and dies from exhaustion or by other means. Originally, in the score, I instructed to keep on repeating this until at faster and faster tempos until you basically drop. But I thought that might be a health and safety hazard. Probably best not to do that. I just thought that this would be an interesting way of ending a piece of mine. I think this is the only one out of the 9 that ends so abruptly. That is the third track. That is my breakdown of The Suicide. I really hope that you enjoyed, and yeah, I hope you can appreciate what I wrote a little bit more. Yeah, that is all I'm going to talk about for now. I will see you in the next breakdown episode. Thank you so much for watching.